She was abandoned by the man who promised to love her forever, left alone to raise their triplets. But years later, this determined mother turned the tables. You won't believe what happened next. Prescott had given him an ultimatum: abandon Ellie and their unborn children or face financial ruin and familial exile. Andrew's choice was clear. Ellie's heart shattered as she realized the man she thought she knew had crumbled under the weight of his father's demands. No apologies, no fight, just a cold, calculated departure. In that moment, Ellie felt the last remnants of her naivete slip away, replaced by a steely resolve. Hours later, amidst tears and exhaustion, Ellie welcomed her daughters into the world. Charlotte, Emily, and Grace became her anchors, their tiny cries grounding her in a reality she had not chosen but was determined to embrace. She looked into their eyes and silently vowed to give them a life filled with love and security, even if it meant facing the world alone. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Andrew's absence was a gaping void, but Ellie refused to dwell on it. Instead, she channeled her pain into action. With the help of her best friend, Chloe Harper, Ellie packed up her life in Boston and moved to Portland, Oregon. Chloe had always been Ellie's rock, a vibrant, encouraging force of nature who believed in Ellie even when she doubted herself. In Portland, Ellie began to rebuild. She juggled sleepless nights with her daughters and tireless days, launching her event planning business, Carter Events. The early years were grueling. Ellie faced countless setbacks, from skeptical clients to financial strains. Yet, through it all, she persevered. Slowly but surely, Carter Events gained traction, becoming a trusted name in Portland. Ellie's meticulous attention to detail and her innate ability to turn visions into realities set her apart. By the time her daughters turned 5, Ellie had not only built a thriving business but also a warm, loving home for her little family. The girls, each with their distinct personalities, filled Ellie's life with purpose. Charlotte was bold and fearless, Emily was gentle and introspective, and Grace possessed an uncanny wisdom that often surprised Ellie. For Ellie, life in Portland became a testament to her resilience and determination. She had carved out a space for herself and her daughters, proving that she could thrive despite the odds. Yet, even as she celebrated her successes, there was a lingering shadow in her heart. The memory of Andrew and his betrayal remained a wound she had never fully healed. She had told herself that she had moved on, that she didn't need closure or apologies. But deep down, she knew the past had a way of resurfacing when least expected. And as the crisp autumn air filled her office one ordinary afternoon, Ellie's carefully constructed world was about to be tested once again. A business proposal lay on her desk, bearing the name of a company tied irrevocably to her past: Prescott Industries. The name stared back at her, mocking the sanctuary she had built. With trembling hands, Ellie realized that the life she thought she had left behind was knocking on her door, and this time, she would have to decide whether to let it in or shut it out forever. Portland's foggy mornings often reminded Ellie of Boston's chilly winters, but they carried a distinct charm that she had come to appreciate. On this particular day, as she sipped her coffee and stared at the Prescott Industries proposal, the memories she had tried so hard to bury began to resurface. Each letter of the company's name seemed to whisper the life she had walked away from, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the moments she thought she would never survive. But along with the pain came memories of joy. Andrew's laugh, the warmth of his embrace, and the dreams they had shared. She shook her head, pushing the thoughts aside. She had 3 little girls who depended on her. There was no time for reminiscing. Chloe's arrival broke Ellie's trance. Her best friend swept into the room, a whirlwind of energy and confidence. Chloe took one look at Ellie's face and knew something was wrong. "All right, spill," she said, dropping her bag on the chair. Ellie hesitated, then slid the proposal across the desk. Chloe's brow furrowed as she read it, her lips tightening. "Prescott Industries? Are you kidding me?" Ellie gave a bitter laugh. "Not even in my nightmares could I have imagined this." The 2 women spent the morning dissecting the proposal. Prescott Industries wanted to collaborate with Carter Events on a massive gala in San Francisco, a lucrative opportunity that could propel Ellie's business into national recognition. But the strings attached felt too heavy. It wasn't just about Andrew. It was about everything the Prescott name represented. Ellie's instincts screamed caution, yet the offer's potential was undeniable. As Chloe listed the pros and cons, Ellie felt torn between her professional ambitions and her personal scars. Later that evening, after tucking her daughters into bed, Ellie sat by the window with a glass of wine. Charlotte had asked earlier why Mommy seemed sad. Her bright eyes filled with concern. Ellie had brushed it off, but now the question lingered. What would Charlotte, Emily, and Grace think if they knew about Andrew? About the man who had walked away from them before they were even born? Her heart ached as she imagined their tiny faces grappling with that truth. Ellie opened her laptop and began researching Prescott Industries. The company's name had always been synonymous with power and prestige, but she was looking for something deeper, something that might help her make sense of Andrew's choices. She scrolled through articles about Richard Prescott, his reputation as a ruthless businessman, and Andrew's seemingly spotless record. The more she read, the more questions arose. Had Andrew truly abandoned them willingly, or had he been a victim of his father's manipulations? The next morning, Ellie decided to confide in Chloe about her plan to accept the meeting. "I need to face this, Chloe. For my own peace of mind," she said firmly. Chloe looked skeptical but nodded. "Just promise me you'll keep your guard up," she replied. Ellie smiled faintly. Her guard had been up for years. She doubted she even knew how to let it down anymore. San Francisco's skyline loomed ahead as Ellie stepped off the plane, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. She had dressed meticulously for the occasion, donning a tailored black suit that exuded professionalism and confidence. Yet, as she approached the sleek offices of Prescott Industries, she couldn't ignore the knots in her stomach. The receptionist directed her to a conference room on the top floor, where the meeting would take place. Ellie took a deep breath before stepping inside. The room was as imposing as she had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, sleek furniture that oozed wealth, and an air of calculated precision. Andrew was already there, standing by the window. He turned as she entered, his face a mixture of surprise and something she couldn't quite place. "Ellie," he said softly, his voice sending an unwelcome shiver down her spine. She forced herself to remain composed, nodding curtly. "Andrew." The meeting began formally enough. A team of executives laid out the proposal, discussing logistics, budgets, and timelines. Ellie focused on the details, refusing to let her gaze linger on Andrew. But she could feel his eyes on her, studying her every move. When the meeting adjourned, the executives left, leaving Ellie and Andrew alone. She stood to leave, but he stepped in her path. "Ellie, wait," he said. "We need to talk." Her pulse quickened as she looked up at him. He was the same Andrew she remembered, yet different. There was a weight to his expression, a shadow in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "There's nothing to talk about," she replied coolly, moving past him. But he caught her arm gently, his touch both familiar and infuriating. "Please," he pleaded. "I know I've done terrible things, but I need you to hear me out." Ellie froze, torn between the urge to lash out and the part of her that wanted answers. She turned back to him, her voice trembling with anger. "You left me, Andrew. You left us. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To our daughters?" His face crumpled at her words, and for a moment, she saw genuine regret. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll never forgive myself for it. But I was young and stupid, and my father—" Ellie cut him off. "Don't you dare blame this on your father. You made your choice." Their conversation ended abruptly when Ellie's phone buzzed. It was Chloe, checking in to make sure she was okay. Ellie used the excuse to leave, brushing past Andrew and out of the room. As she stepped onto the bustling streets below, she felt a mixture of relief and anger. She had confronted Andrew, but the answers she sought still eluded her. Back in her hotel room, Ellie replayed the encounter in her mind. The pain in Andrew's voice had sounded real, but could she trust it? Her daughters deserved the truth, but Ellie wasn't sure if she was ready to let Andrew back into their lives. The next steps would require more courage than she had ever imagined, and for the first time in years, Ellie felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. The morning light filtered through the hotel curtains as Ellie sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. Chloe had left her a dozen messages, each more urgent than the last, urging her to call back and share the details of the meeting. Ellie sighed, replaying her encounter with Andrew in her mind. His regret had seemed genuine, but she wasn't ready to forgive or forget. The memories of his betrayal were etched too deeply into her heart, like scars that refused to fade. After a brisk shower and a strong coffee, Ellie set her resolve. Today wasn't about Andrew, it was about Carter events. The Prescott Gala was an opportunity she couldn't afford to pass up, regardless of who was behind it. She spent the morning reviewing contracts and sending emails, determined to approach the partnership with professionalism and caution. Yet, despite her focus, her thoughts kept drifting to Andrew. Why had he waited 5 years to reach out? What did he hope to achieve now? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Expecting room service, Ellie opened it to find Andrew standing there, a hesitant expression on his face. She stiffened, her hand gripping the door frame. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. He held up a coffee cup as if it were a peace offering. "I thought we could talk," he said. Properly this time. Reluctantly, Ellie stepped aside, letting him in. They sat across from each other, the tension in the room palpable. Andrew began to speak, his voice steady but laced with emotion. He told her about the years he had spent under his father's thumb, the guilt that had consumed him since the day he walked away, and the steps he had taken to break free from Richard Prescott's control. Ellie listened in silence, her emotions a storm of anger, sorrow, and a flicker of understanding. When he finished, Ellie's voice was cold but firm. "Your guilt doesn't erase what you did, Andrew. You left me to face everything alone. I don't care how scared or manipulated you were. You had a choice, and you chose to abandon us." Andrew flinched at her words but didn't argue. Instead, he nodded, his expression one of quiet acceptance. "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want a chance to be part of their lives. Please, Ellie." The sincerity in his voice shook her resolve, but she refused to let him see it. "I'll think about it," she replied curtly. Andrew's face fell slightly, but he nodded. As he left, Ellie felt a pang of something she couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps, or maybe hope. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. There was no room for hope when it came to Andrew Prescott. Back in Portland, Ellie returned to the comforting routine of her life. The Prescott proposal sat untouched on her desk for days as she focused on her daughters and her business. Yet, the memory of Andrew's words lingered, a persistent echo that refused to fade. Charlotte, Emily, and Grace had begun asking questions about their father. Not often, but enough to remind Ellie that the truth was a door she couldn't keep closed forever. Chloe noticed Ellie's distraction during their weekly lunch. "All right, spill it," she said, her tone leaving no room for deflection. Ellie sighed and recounted her conversation with Andrew. Chloe listened intently, her expression shifting between anger and concern. "Ellie, I get that he's trying to make amends, but you can't just let him waltz back into your life. You've built something amazing without him. You don't need his complications." Ellie nodded, grateful for Chloe's unwavering support. But later that evening, as she watched her daughters play in the backyard, doubts crept in. Was she doing the right thing by keeping Andrew at arm's length? Charlotte's fearless laughter, Emily's quiet thoughtfulness, and Grace's curious questions were reminders of the beautiful family she had built. But didn't they deserve to know their father? To make their own decisions about him? The next day, Ellie called Andrew. His surprise was evident, but he quickly agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a cozy cafe near her office. As they sat across from each other, Ellie laid out her terms. "If you want to be part of their lives, it's going to be on my terms. No surprises, no games. And if you hurt them," her voice broke, but she quickly regained her composure. "If you hurt them, Andrew, I'll never forgive you." Andrew's expression was solemn as he nodded. "I understand, Ellie. I just want to be their father, for however long you'll let me." His words were earnest, but Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that allowing him back into their lives was a gamble, a risk she wasn't sure she could afford. As the weeks passed, Andrew began to fulfill his promise. He sent thoughtful gifts for the girls, carefully avoiding anything extravagant that might intimidate or overwhelm them. He met them for ice cream at a local park, where Charlotte immediately took to him. Emily remained shy but curious, and Grace observed him with the quiet intensity that often unnerved even Ellie. Watching him interact with them was both heartwarming and agonizing. It was a glimpse of the life they could have had, a life Andrew had chosen to forsake. But not everything was smooth. Richard Prescott's looming presence became an unwelcome shadow in Ellie's life. Rumors of his disapproval reached her ears, along with whispers of his attempts to undermine her growing business. The partnership with Prescott Industries, once a promising opportunity, now felt like a trap, a way for Richard to exert control over her life once more. Ellie found herself at a crossroads, torn between protecting her family's independence and seizing an opportunity that could secure their future. The stakes were higher than ever, and Ellie knew she would have to tread carefully. Andrew's reappearance had reignited old wounds and introduced new challenges, but Ellie was determined to face them head-on. For her daughters, for her business, and for herself, she would find a way forward, even if it meant confronting the ghosts of her past once more. The tension in Ellie's life reached a boiling point as Andrew's presence became more regular. He had cautiously integrated himself into the girls' lives, and while Charlotte's vivacious spirit welcomed him wholeheartedly, Emily's reserved nature and Grace's perceptive demeanor kept him at arm's length. Ellie couldn't help but watch from the sidelines, torn between admiration for his efforts and the lingering bitterness of his betrayal. It was during one of their shared park outings that Grace's questions cut through the air like a blade. "Why didn't you come before?" she asked Andrew, her innocent eyes unyielding. Andrew froze, the bright autumn sun casting long shadows over his face. Ellie's heart tightened as she watched him grapple with his response. "I made a mistake," he said softly, his voice heavy with regret. "A big mistake. But I'm here now, and I want to be with you. All of you." Grace studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded, her 5-year-old mind seemingly satisfied with his honesty. But for Ellie, the moment left her with more questions than answers. Could she truly trust the man who had walked away from them so easily? As the days turned into weeks, Ellie's concerns deepened. Rumors about Richard Prescott's disapproval of Andrew's involvement with his daughters began to surface. It wasn't long before Ellie received a cryptic email from an anonymous source claiming to have information that could change everything. Against her better judgment, she decided to follow the lead. The meeting was arranged at a small cafe in downtown Portland. Ellie arrived early, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. A middle-aged woman approached her table, her demeanor nervous but determined. "My name is Linda," she said quietly, sitting down across from Ellie. "I used to work for Richard Prescott." Ellie's breath caught as Linda began to reveal the depths of Richard's manipulation. "He made Andrew's life hell after you got pregnant," Linda said. "He threatened to disown him, cut him off from everything. But there's more. Richard's been keeping tabs on you, Ellie. He knows about Carter events, and he's not happy about your success." The revelation left Ellie reeling. She had always suspected Richard's hand in Andrew's abandonment, but hearing the details made her blood boil. Worse, the thought that Richard was still meddling in her life filled her with dread. She thanked Linda and left the cafe, her mind racing with the implications of what she had learned. That evening, Ellie confronted Andrew. She shared Linda's revelations, her anger bubbling over. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "All these years, you let me believe you walked away because you didn't care. But it was him, wasn't it? Your father pulled the strings." Andrew looked stricken, his usual composure shattered. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "I thought if I stayed away, you and the girls would be safe from him. But I see now that I was wrong. I should have fought harder. I should have been there for you." Ellie's eyes filled with tears, her emotions a storm she couldn't control. "It doesn't change what happened, Andrew. It doesn't erase the pain you caused. But it does make me wonder, what is he planning now?" Ellie's revelation about Richard Prescott's ongoing interference marked a turning point. For years, she had fought to leave the past behind, but now it was clear that the past wasn't done with her. She decided to take matters into her own hands, enlisting Chloe's help to uncover the extent of Richard's influence on her life and business. Chloe, ever resourceful, dove into research with fervor. Together, They uncovered a trail of subtle yet unmistakable sabotage, potential clients who had mysteriously withdrawn, vendors who suddenly refused to work with Carter events, and whispers of Richard's connections in Portland's business circles. The evidence was damning, and it only fueled Ellie's determination to protect what she had built. Meanwhile, Andrew was waging his own battle. For the first time, he confronted his father directly, demanding an explanation for his actions. The confrontation was explosive, with Richard dismissing Andrew's newfound sense of responsibility as weakness. "You're a Prescott," Richard snarled. "Your loyalty is to this family, not to some woman and her kids." Andrew's response was uncharacteristically defiant. "Those kids are my daughters, and Ellie is the mother of my children. I won't let you ruin their lives just to protect your empire." The conversation ended with Richard's thinly veiled threat. "If you choose them over this family, don't expect to have anything left." Despite his father's warning, Andrew refused to back down. He began working closely with Ellie to counteract Richard's influence, sharing contacts and resources to stabilize Carter Events' position. The partnership was uneasy but effective, and Ellie couldn't deny that Andrew's commitment seemed genuine. Yet, the question of his loyalty lingered in the back of her mind. As they worked together, the tension between them simmered. One evening, as they reviewed plans for the Prescott Gala, their professional facade cracked. "Why are you really doing this, Andrew?" Ellie asked, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "Is it guilt? Or do you actually care about us?" Andrew's gaze met hers, his expression raw. "I care about you, Ellie. I always have. I just didn't know how to fight for you back then. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths and unresolved emotions. Ellie wanted to believe him, but the scars of the past were too deep. "Words aren't enough, Andrew," she said softly. "If you want to be part of our lives, you have to prove it. Not just to me, but to Charlotte, Emily, and Grace." As the night deepened, Ellie realized that she was standing at a crossroads. The path forward would be fraught with challenges, but one thing was clear. She couldn't keep running from the past. Whether she liked it or not, Andrew was part of her story, and she would have to decide what role he would play in their future. Ellie's life had always been a delicate balancing act, but with Andrew's reentry and Richard's looming interference, the scale felt dangerously close to tipping. The Prescott Gala loomed ahead, a pivotal event that could determine Carter Events' future. Despite her hesitations, Ellie had committed to making it a success. The girls, oblivious to the turmoil, continued their joyful routines, their laughter echoing through the house like a balm to Ellie's frayed nerves. The morning of the gala, Ellie woke early, her mind racing with last-minute details. Andrew had offered to handle the logistics with the Prescott team, and for once, Ellie found herself grateful for his presence. He had been surprisingly dependable in recent weeks, working tirelessly to ensure the event went smoothly. Yet, trust was a bridge Ellie wasn't sure she could cross just yet. As the gala unfolded that evening, the grandeur of the event took Ellie's breath away. The venue was transformed into a shimmering spectacle of light and elegance, every detail meticulously executed. Guests mingled under the sparkling chandeliers, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Ellie moved through the crowd, ensuring everything ran seamlessly, but her focus kept drifting to Andrew. He stood near the entrance, exuding confidence as he greeted influential guests. For a moment, Ellie saw a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with, and it unnerved her. The evening took an unexpected turn when Richard Prescott made a dramatic entrance. His towering presence commanded attention, and the room seemed to shift around him. Ellie's pulse quickened as their eyes met across the room. Richard approached her with a measured smile, his tone dripping with insincerity. "Elizabeth," he said smoothly, "what a remarkable job you've done. Truly impressive." Ellie forced a polite smile, every muscle in her body tense. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott. I'm glad you think so." Their exchange was brief, but Richard's parting words lingered. "You've built something extraordinary, but remember, success is fragile. It can be taken away as quickly as it's earned." The encounter left Ellie shaken, but she refused to let it ruin the night. She sought out Andrew, who seemed to sense her unease. "What did he say to you?" Andrew asked, his voice low and protective. Ellie hesitated before recounting the exchange. Andrew's jaw tightened, his frustration palpable. "He doesn't get to intimidate you," he said firmly. "Not anymore." The gala ended in triumph, but Ellie's mind was far from settled. As she reviewed the night's success with Chloe the next morning, her best friend's expression turned serious. "You need to be careful, Ellie," Chloe warned. "Richard's not just a businessman. He's a manipulator. If he's set his sights on you, he won't stop until he gets what he wants." Ellie nodded, her determination solidifying. She had come too far to let anyone, especially Richard Prescott, tear down what she had built. But as she looked at her daughters playing in the backyard, she knew the fight ahead would require more than just resolve. It would require courage, strategy, and a willingness to face her deepest fears. The aftermath of the gala brought a brief period of calm, but Ellie knew it wouldn't last. Richard Prescott's veiled threat lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of the precarious position she was in. Determined to protect her family and her business, Ellie decided to dig deeper into Richard's dealings. With Chloe's help, she uncovered a trail of questionable business practices and unethical maneuvers that painted a damning picture of the Prescott empire. Ellie's resolve to confront Richard grew stronger, but she also knew she couldn't do it alone. To her surprise, Andrew became her greatest ally. He shared stories of his father's ruthless tactics, exposing the extent of Richard's control over the family. The more they worked together, the more Ellie began to see a different side of Andrew. A man trying to atone for his mistakes and break free from his father's shadow. One evening, as they worked late in Ellie's office, Andrew revealed a truth that shook her to her core. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "When I left, it wasn't just because of my father. He threatened to destroy you, Ellie. Your reputation, your career, everything. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you." Ellie stared at him, her mind reeling. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she demanded. Andrew's gaze dropped, shame evident in his expression. "I was scared. Scared of him. Scared of losing everything. But most of all, I was scared of failing you and the girls. And I did fail. I know that now." The revelation was a turning point for Ellie. While it didn't erase the pain of Andrew's betrayal, it gave her a new perspective on his actions. For the first time, she began to see him not just as the man who had abandoned her, but as someone who had been trapped by circumstances beyond his control. It didn't make forgiveness easy, but it made it possible. As they continued their investigation into Richard's activities, Ellie and Andrew uncovered a scheme that could bring him down. Richard had been using Prescott Industries to funnel money into offshore accounts, evading taxes and funding unethical ventures. Armed with this information, Ellie knew they had a powerful weapon, but the risk was immense. Exposing Richard could lead to retaliation that would jeopardize everything she had worked for. The tension came to a head when Richard confronted Ellie directly. He appeared at her office unannounced, his tone deceptively cordial. "Elizabeth," he said, closing the door behind him, "I hear you've been doing some digging. I'd advise you to tread carefully. You have a lot to lose." Ellie met his gaze with unwavering defiance. "You don't scare me, Richard. Not anymore. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. I'll make sure of it." Richard's smile was cold, his words a chilling warning. "We'll see about that." As he left, Ellie felt a surge of determination. She wasn't the same woman she had been 5 years ago. She was stronger, smarter, and ready to fight for what mattered most. With Andrew by her side, she prepared to take the next step, knowing that the battle ahead would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Ellie knew the moment had come to make a decisive move. The evidence against Richard Prescott was damning, but wielding it effectively required precision. With Andrew's help, Ellie began assembling a plan to expose his father's corruption. She enlisted Chloe and a trusted legal advisor, Eleanor Park, a sharp and fearless attorney known for taking on powerful adversaries. The team worked tirelessly in secret, gathering documentation and preparing their strategy. Late nights in Ellie's office became the norm, with Andrew showing a side of himself Ellie had never fully seen before. A man deeply committed to righting his wrongs. As they worked together, an unspoken bond began to form, a fragile truce built on their shared determination to protect their daughters and secure a future free from Richard's shadow. Meanwhile, Ellie couldn't ignore the emotional toll the situation was taking on her. Charlotte, Emily, and Grace had begun asking more questions about their father's sudden involvement in their lives. Charlotte's bold curiosity led to frequent inquiries about their family history, while Emily's quiet reflections often resulted in thoughtful but piercing questions. Grace, ever the intuitive one, sensed the tension and voiced her fears one evening during bedtime. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" she asked, her wide eyes searching Ellie's for reassurance. Ellie pulled Grace into a tight hug, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "No, sweetheart. We're safe, and I promise I'll always take care of you." The words were as much a vow to herself as they were to her daughters. As the Prescott Industries gala drew nearer, Ellie's anxiety grew. The gala would provide the perfect opportunity to confront Richard publicly, but the risks were immense. Eleanor reminded her of the stakes during a late-night meeting. "If Richard realizes what you're planning before we're ready, he won't hesitate to retaliate. You need to be prepared for every possible outcome." Andrew, too, voiced his concerns. "You don't have to do this, Ellie. I'll confront him alone if it comes to that." But Ellie shook her head. "This isn't just about you or me, Andrew. It's about our daughters, our future. I won't let him control us anymore." The days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind of preparation. Ellie finalized her presentation, complete with undeniable proof of Richard's misdeeds. Chloe handled logistical support, ensuring their plan would go off without a hitch. Andrew coordinated quietly with key allies within Prescott Industries, securing their support for the confrontation. Together, they prepared for the storm that was about to break. The gala was a dazzling affair, the kind of event designed to project power and prestige. The venue sparkled with opulence, from the grand chandeliers to the perfectly manicured floral arrangements. Ellie stood near the entrance, her heart pounding as she scanned the room. She had chosen a striking black gown for the occasion, a symbol of her confidence and resolve. But beneath her composed exterior, a tempest brewed. Andrew appeared at her side, his presence steadying. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Ellie nodded, her grip tightening on the USB drive containing the evidence. "As ready as I'll ever be." The first hour of the gala passed in a blur of pleasantries and polite conversations. Ellie's sharp eyes caught Richard Prescott moving through the crowd, his demeanor as imposing as ever. She watched him interact with the city's elite, his charm masking the corruption beneath. Her resolve hardened. Tonight would mark the beginning of the end for Richard Prescott. As the evening progressed, Ellie took the stage, ostensibly to deliver a speech about Carter Events' partnership with Prescott Industries. The room fell silent as she began, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "Tonight, we celebrate not just collaboration but integrity, the foundation of true success." Her gaze swept the crowd, landing briefly on Richard, whose smile remained fixed but tense. Ellie's tone sharpened as she transitioned into her revelation. "However, integrity is not a given. It must be earned, protected, and upheld. And when it's violated, it's our duty to act." The audience murmured as Ellie unveiled the first piece of evidence, a projection on the screen behind her showing Richard's offshore accounts and fraudulent dealings. The room erupted into chaos, gasps and whispers filling the air. Richard rose from his seat, his face a mask of fury. "This is outrageous," he thundered. "You have no proof of these baseless accusations." Ellie held her ground, her voice unwavering. "The proof is right here, Richard. And this is just the beginning." Andrew stepped forward, adding his voice to Ellie's. "It's time everyone sees the truth. For too long, you've hidden behind power and fear. But that ends now." His declaration silenced the room, his words carrying the weight of years of suppressed defiance. The confrontation reached its climax when Eleanor joined Ellie on stage, presenting the legal implications of Richard's actions. "Mr. Prescott, your influence ends tonight," she declared. "We've notified the authorities, and they will be following up on these matters immediately." Richard's carefully constructed facade crumbled as security escorted him from the venue. The room buzzed with stunned disbelief, the Prescott Empire's reputation shattered in an instant. Ellie stood tall, her heart racing but triumphant. She had faced her greatest fear and emerged victorious. As the gala concluded, Ellie found herself alone on the balcony, the cool night air soothing her frayed nerves. Andrew joined her, his expression filled with gratitude and something deeper, admiration. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly. Ellie turned to him, her eyes searching his. "I couldn't have done it without you." For the first time in years, Ellie allowed herself to feel the weight of what they had accomplished. The battle wasn't over, but they had taken the first step toward a future free from Richard's control. And for the first time, Ellie felt a flicker of hope, not just for her daughters but for herself. The days following the gala were a whirlwind of media attention and legal proceedings. Richard Prescott's empire began to unravel as investigators uncovered more layers of corruption. For Ellie, the victory was bittersweet. She had achieved her goal of exposing the man who had cast a shadow over her life, but the fallout left her questioning what the future would hold for her daughters, her business, and even Andrew. Back in Portland, life settled into a tentative new rhythm. Charlotte, Emily, and Grace were blissfully unaware of the turmoil, their days filled with laughter and school projects. Andrew's presence in their lives had grown steadier, and Ellie couldn't deny the impact he had on the girls. Charlotte reveled in their shared adventures. Emily found comfort in his quiet encouragement, and even Grace had begun to warm to him, her sharp questions now tinged with curiosity rather than suspicion. Ellie, however, remained guarded. Despite Andrew's efforts to prove himself, the scars of the past were not so easily healed. One evening, as they sat on the porch after putting the girls to bed, Andrew broke the silence. "Ellie, I know I've hurt you in ways I can never fully undo, but I want you to know that I'm not the same man who walked away 5 years ago. I want to build something real with you, if you'll let me." Ellie's heart ached at his words, torn between hope and fear. "Andrew, I see how much you've changed, and I can't deny that you've been there for the girls. But trust isn't something that happens overnight. It's something we'll have to rebuild one step at a time." Andrew nodded, accepting her words with quiet determination. "I'll wait as long as it takes, Ellie. You and the girls are worth it." As the months passed, Carter events flourished. The Prescott scandal had ironically boosted Ellie's reputation, with clients admiring her courage and integrity. Opportunities poured in, including an offer to expand her business to the East Coast. The proposal was tempting but came with its own set of challenges. Accepting it would mean uprooting her family and potentially working closely with Andrew, who had taken steps to rebuild his career independently of his father's tainted legacy. Ellie found herself at another crossroads. During a quiet evening with Chloe, she voiced her concerns. "I've worked so hard to build a life here. What if moving disrupts everything we've created?" Chloe smiled knowingly. "Ellie, you've proven time and again that you can overcome anything. The question isn't whether you can handle this. It's whether this move aligns with the life you want for yourself and the girls." Ellie spent weeks deliberating, consulting with Andrew and her daughters. Charlotte was thrilled at the idea of new adventures. Emily hesitated but expressed quiet excitement, and Grace, ever perceptive, asked, "Will you be happy, Mommy?" The question lingered in Ellie's mind, guiding her toward her decision. On Christmas Eve, Ellie gathered her family in the living room. The tree sparkled with lights, and the scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air. She knelt before her daughters, their faces glowing with anticipation. "We're moving," she announced, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "To Boston. It's going to be a big change, but I believe it's the right step for us." The girls' reactions were a mix of excitement and nervous chatter, but Ellie's gaze shifted to Andrew. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Does this mean?" he began, but Ellie interrupted, her smile soft. "It means we'll try. But on my terms, Andrew." Christmas morning dawned with a renewed sense of hope. Ellie watched her daughters unwrap their gifts, their laughter filling the room. Andrew joined them, his presence no longer an intrusion but a part of their family's evolving dynamic. Ellie realized that, while the journey ahead would be uncertain, it was also filled with promise. Later that evening, as snow began to fall outside, Ellie and Andrew found themselves standing by the window. He reached for her hand hesitantly, and this time, she didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with emotion, "for giving me another chance." Ellie looked at him, her heart lighter than it had been in years. This isn't just for you, Andrew. It's for all of us. She glanced at their daughters playing by the fire, their joy a reminder of what truly mattered. We have a long way to go, but maybe it's time we stopped looking back and started moving forward. As the clock struck midnight, marking the beginning of a new year, Ellie felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The past would always be a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. With her daughters by her side and Andrew working to earn his place, Ellie was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. Thank you for listening until the end. What did you think of this story? If you can, leave your feedback in the comments. It helps me improve and motivates me to keep sharing stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will also touch your heart. A big kiss, and see you in the next story.